Okay, as promised, it's 3:31, so we're going to get rolling. Welcome to the session. Thanks so much for attending here at the Indiana Arts Homecoming. My name is Chapin Schnick. I'm on the staff at the Indiana Arts Commission, and I'll just be in the background for this session to help out with tech. And if you have questions that you want to throw in the chat, I'll be helping our presenters monitor that. So, Mark, if you don't mind advancing one, please.
Sure. Let me move over there. Sorry.
No, you're good.
All right. There you go.
Cool. And yeah, so here we have our title, At Your Core, Who Are You Pivoting During the Pandemic? We have three wonderful presenters. Two you can see are already present, Mark Kesling and Jheel Patel. And then Jheel Ditmire will also be joining us in a little bit. And if you don't mind advancing again. Perfect. I just want to mention a couple things and then we'll have our presenters get started. So we do ask that you do remain muted at all times. If you choose to turn on video, that's okay. But I'm turning people off just so that we can make sure that the recording keeps our presenters' faces in with the PowerPoint. And if you would like to rename yourself so that we can see who you are, what organization you're with, you can do that by hovering over your name. And finally, we have a lovely captioner here. If you've already attended sessions, you know this, but you can turn that on. So glad you're here, and I'm gonna let Mark go ahead and take it away.
Great, thank you so much. Let me skip into this part. So I've got with me a friend, colleague, and one of my board members, Jheel Patel. And Jheel is a PhD neuroscience candidate, and she's gonna bring a perspective of a board member, but also the perspective of neuroscience into this and what stress and all those things that you are all feeling, how they affect the brain and they affect learning. And as we said, Jheel Ditmire hopefully will be able to join us here. Sometimes she gets tied up in the studio at WFYI here in Indianapolis, but hopefully she'll join us as well. And so, our topic is really at your core, who are you? And we were talking about the ways in which you can pivot. And pivoting for us as a small nonprofit was a little easier to do in one way and very difficult in another. And so the easier was being small, we didn't have quite some of the issues that a larger institution has. But at the same time, it also meant we didn't have other resources that we could pull upon, particularly financial resources and those things. And so we refocused back on our mission as an organization. And two things I want to talk about really quickly, and that's the concept of resistance versus resilience. Some of you who know me also know I teach at Butler Urban Ecology. And there are two concepts that we use a lot in urban ecology about the natural world as well as humans. And in this context, resistance is what generally an institution does, generally what artists will do when they're confronted with something that is a huge change like we are with COVID. And so we'll often kind of build a capacity to weather it out. And I think that's what all of us did at first. We didn't know how long it was going to be, what the conditions were going to be like. Often we mistakenly think that resisting the winds of change that we have, we try to resist it as much as we possibly can. There are institutions across the United States. I belong to the American Association of Museums, and in fact across the world, that are pivoting to move away, unfortunately, from their core mission. We're seeing some scary thoughts and ideas that maybe what's more important is the collection being preserved in a museum or an institution, like an art museum. So we are seeing some people really significantly go back on what was an issue. It also means that many people were abandoning some of their issues, some of their work with diversity and other things. And so a lot of times that resistance can be that you go back and then eventually the storm will pass and we'll all go back to normal. Wouldn't that be great if that were true? Resiliency is totally different. And it's built to help you survive stress and traumatic events. And so the hallmark of being resilient, either as an individual or as an institution, is your ability to recover from and adjust and change. So remember that resiliency comes out of refocusing your attention away from the problem and focusing it on what you do. So if you're a particular artist, you should be focusing on the thing that is core to you, core to your art. If you're an institution, what is core to your mission? What was always the most important? What I've found is that many of our organizations have done mission drift over time because we had extra funds or we had extra staff. We chased maybe a grant to go after something, and that allowed us to expand ourselves. When we had to face conditions that we have today where we have to contract, it's really essential that you go back and say, what's important about us? If you've taken on some new initiatives, like being able to have a more diverse board, looking at diversifying your staff, you should stay with those initiatives because they are truly part of your new core. In 2020, we know it's a really stressful year. And again, we pivoted ourselves, and that was tricky because we had prided ourselves on being able to build a museum outdoors, which was really being able to create neighborhoods that were exhibit galleries that had programs in them, had exhibits, but now people can't touch things. So our issue became, how do we do public art? How do we do that? And so we really changed ourselves in a way to be able to be on a platform that was very new to us and a little bit different. Jheel, you want to talk a little bit about what stress does and writing out these winds of change and those parts of things?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to preface this, part of my research is looking at stress models. So I study stress and anxiety and fear. And I also, clinically, this would be relevant for like post-traumatic stress disorder, for example. So in terms of what stress does to the brain, I mean, we have a lot of data out there about genetic changes that predispose you to being, to having different responses to stress, for example. So in comparison to resiliency, you might be more resistant to change, and that's could be genetic. But there's also what we call the epigenetics, which is what your environment does to you. And this is really what's been interesting, especially this year, is because 2020 has been a stressful year for every single person, I would believe. But being able to form, your community, or being able to adapt to how the world is right now, has been a major factor in how resilient or adaptive people have been. And this goes for organizations too, how adaptive you can be in response to any sort of stressful events. And so in terms of the brain, I would say that we see a lot of specific changes. There's, specific brain regions that are very important, that are activated. For example, I study the amygdala, which a lot of people, say is the fear center, but it's also, surprisingly and interestingly, it's also known for social interactions. It's known for how well you regulate your emotions, not just fear, but any other happy, sad, whatever other emotions you have, but being able to regulate those well and healthily. So all that to say that even though the brain seems very, we're still studying a lot of things, but we have indications to suggest that depending on how your environment looks and how your social community looks around you, you might be able to adapt and, become resilient to that change or to the stress in a much better way. And so that is in line with what a lot of Mark's mentioned, is this ability to take stress or stressful events and turn it into something positive, which your community also has a major effect on.
Great. Jheel, that's really helpful. We'll have plenty of time for questions, so maybe some people can ask if they want more clarification. So what I'm talking about, again, is how do we manage really, and this graphic shows it, how do we manage our risk? And your core mission is really where you need to be. It's probably where you needed to be all along. But as I said before, sometimes things allow us to drift out. This isn't the first time we've faced some pretty hard times, but this is a little bit more challenging in that we don't necessarily know much about what's going on. Economic recessions we've had some challenges with, with the world as it is, but those things we kind of know where we're going to go. Why it's been so challenging with COVID is we don't understand the virus itself very much. And so from the scientific and medical community, we get conflicting information. And so Jill's right, it's really important that you kind of focus away from that. It isn't, how do I ride out the storm? Or how do I get through COVID so that I can go back to doing what I'm doing? It really is, what is it that I wanted to do? To the very beginning of my core, why did I start my organization? And that's questions that the board and staff all need to wrestle with. Who are we? And who do we want to be right now? Because we don't know where we're going to be in a month or 6 months. So again, it's just a little bit different to think about that. When we look at it, we want to understand that our community is built by social interactions. So 3 things happened in COVID. And we might be, hi, Jill.
Hi, Mark. Sorry.
It's all right. Welcome.
I'm here.
So 3 things really happened during COVID that are important for all of us to recognize. And there are 3 important things that lead to human health. So human health and well-being is based on your medical part of it. In other words, how healthy are you? How well are you actually in terms of your systems, your functioning, your physiology, and all that? We kind of have addressed that. I don't know that we addressed it really, really well, but we did address it through the government and some of our organizations as well as we can. We're trying to keep people well. We're trying to, make sure we have the resources in the hospital and that. The other 2, though, that add to our mental health are the idea of being able to deal with your social. So health and well-being is also about your social health. One of the very things that we took away from everybody almost was the ability to be social. We removed it to Zoom formats, which are okay, but as you all know, they're not the same thing. And so we all need that social part. And the third piece we need is the emotional part. We also need emotional support for what we're doing. If you do not have those 3, you do not have health and well-being as a human. And so it's essential that we look at how do we build community under circumstances where we aren't able to be physically present with one another. And so that became, I think, the challenge, Jill, with the board and all of us and what we were doing in pivoting. Any thoughts on how we were able to pivot to our mission on that?
Well, for us, we work with our artists and our scientists all year round, so we were able to kind of reach out to them right away to find out what they needed and how we could help them change things. And I think that because of our organization is pretty fluid year round anyway. I'm outside because we're outside. We don't have a standard building, so we're more a little flexible about things, I believe. And so I think our board was able to adapt a little bit more easily. And yeah, we had to have Zoom meetings and that kind of thing, but everybody was really good at checking in with each other and checking in with the projects that we had underway. Because as many people know, we have multiple things going on at once, So everything's kind of always in a state of flux. I think maybe it was a little easier for our organization and our board to kind of adjust a little bit that way.
That's great. One of the things that I think is important also that is that we already were in touch. Our model of connecting art and science and artists and scientists with community really allowed us to have a whole lot of connections prior to going into this. And but that allowed us to collaborate. We've always built daVinci Pursuit as a collaborative model. And we've seen under COVID that those collaborations mean more than they ever have. That, you know, large institutions and small can now work together in ways maybe that foundations have always wanted us to work, but we're seeing a different change.
Yeah, in fact, this week we are collaborating with Indie Convergence on a fundraiser because they were faced with the same problem that we were. You know, we have our fundraisers twice a year. They're very interactive, they're in person. We always come up with a theme. We always have a scientist and artist that we interview talking about that theme. That same theme carries through with the food that we serve, with the beverages that we serve, and it's always in a small space. Well, we can't do that anymore. Indie Convergence has their outdoor venues, since most of their venues are done along the river with their outdoor all-terrain stage and their floating stage. So we decided to combine with them to put our heads together and come up with some kind of a both virtual and live production that maybe can balance it out for both of us. And so this week we've been doing a virtual outreach with online videos that reflect back to a theme that we have created these little goodie boxes that are filled with art and science experiments and crafts. And every day we release a new video that talks about something in the box that people have purchased as their donation. And every day they get to do something new and interesting. And then we've been leading up to, on Friday, we were planning to have a live outdoor event with the Palace and the Kenyatta Dance Company. And we've had to cancel that, unfortunately, because the weather looks a little iffy. And even though we had things spaced out to be socially distanced and stuff, we think that people are still a little reluctant, or more reluctant than we thought to come out. So our ticket sales were not where we wanted them to be at that point. But it's allowed us to collaborate with another group in a team effort. And it's been really beneficial for both organizations to do that. And I think by doing that way we don't cancel each other out either, because everybody's been scrambling as to how they're going to have their fundraisers this year and how they're going to do them. And I think by joining together with other similar organizations, people can really help each other out.
Yeah, that's great. I know with Jheel, you and I had talked a long time ago. We wanted to do a project that you talked about, which was Women in STEM. And you want to tell a little bit about that project and then how we had to adapt and how that's worked?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think probably the first conversation I had with you, Mark, was about this project. And the idea when I initially had it was I wanted to do a roundtable discussion that would bring in local women in STEM and really just talk about, you know, challenges, but also successes that they've faced in their careers. And this is coming from, you know, me personally wanting a support system like this and realizing that that's what's helped me in my career. And I think that that's important for the community to have too. And initially I wanted to do a photo series that would either go online or, you know, in a physical space that would feature these women. And for a while, you know, we were planning on doing roundtables, and the timing was really hard to coordinate with everyone. But when COVID happened, as difficult of a time as it was, I think we found the opportunity to finally put this project in motion, which we did by pivoting into a video series. So, and kind of fits perfectly into this podcast culture that people have. You know, you want little tidbits of information to just watch or listen to while you work, and this is perfect. So we managed to bring women in and have discussions with them. And by doing it kind of individually or in smaller clusters, we have these small conversations that have their own topics. And that's really very similar to what you would see in a podcast, is you touch on different things that these women have experienced in their field. And I think that it's very, very interesting, especially for younger women who are either starting their careers or even farther along in STEM. But it's been really fun and really nice to be able to, even during this year, be able to still carry on this project and actually have it, I think, work out probably even better than if we'd done the roundtables in the photo series. So, and it's accessible to everyone online because it's on our website. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's really pushed us out a little further, and don't you think, Jheel, in terms of, we think that the audience is broader than we originally thought. It may be young teenage girls, girls of college age, and women who really, and we say STEM, but we really think about STEAM, as all of you know, but who are really thinking about taking on the challenge, really, that our society puts forward for women to enter into fields. And so we think that by pivoting during this, our core mission was to communicate science through art forms, and this works perfectly. Another pivot that we did this year that was really significant was we had been aligned for a while with a small theater company here called Timepiece Theater. And with Timepiece Theater, we pivoted with them because we couldn't do live performances. Theater is one of the real casualties of all this. Live theater, which Jheel, we're finding out even with music, live music, it's really a huge casualty. So when we pivoted with Timepiece, we ended up producing these pieces with historic characters who get interviewed with somebody from the present. So we have, using the theater arts, we have an actor or actress who comes back, has a conversation with a host, and also a conversation with a present day scientist.
Expand, but also then you're going to keep building on that, because those people will help you reach another audience and then another audience. And so yeah, I have really appreciated how diverse we've been, and how I do think that that's been one of our strongest factors that's enabled us to do so well this year especially, but even in past years.
I think too, sometimes boards do worry a lot about getting members on their board that can financially support the board. But if you get a board of diverse, creative people that are in touch with their organizations, with where they live, with where they work, with where they play, they're automatically going to bring in more outside support. So when you do have fundraisers, or when you do go after grants to support you for your projects, that backdoor funding kind of automatically funnels its way in. So once again, so you're not so chained to, we've got to have the money to do this kind of thing. Instead, you're more able to, this is our mission and this is what we want to do. And this is how we're going to put our money where our mouth is, because the money is going to be there because the true passion and support for our cause is really there.
Yeah, and I think it all goes back, the key here, it all goes back to the slide I have up, which is on listening to understand. Mm-hmm. And it's this idea that we don't listen because we're required to. There are organizations I've been on that other end where they wanted me on an advisory committee, and they put me there, and they sit and they listen and we talk and we do a report. That's it. I think there's a difference between just listening and then listening to understand the people you're listening to. And then that listening to understand turns into how you change the product that you have. There's no better time right now than to listen. The public is telling us all something. And it isn't just COVID. There are many other messages. COVID is bringing to the surface many things that have laid hidden for a very long time. And so this is really our opportunity to really listen and try to understand the needs of the people we serve, as well as who we are. And it takes that creativity that we've been talking about, And it leaves me kind of at the end of this with asking, well, who are you? Each one of you that's participating, who are you really? What is your organization really? Can you say it? Can you say who you serve? Can you say not just some big glowing mission statement and vision statement, but can you actually have your board members and your staff have it roll off their mouth as to why they come to work every day, why they support the organization? And I would think you would find that a lot of people can't. And that's a scary place to be. And so this is, I think, a good side of COVID is it's an adjustment for us. It's a period in which we can refocus our mission. We can go back to our core. We can say, who do we want to be going forward? And how do we want to have our audiences? And all bets are off the table in terms of the old funding sources and everything that we had, because they're all getting taxed in terms of how much need there is. There are lots of places that donors have to go with their funds. So we can't just rely only on the donors we have. So that, back to what Jheel was saying, that diversity is letting us see new populations, new communities that support us in other ways. And so those are all new sources of funds. And we see ourselves as being able to move forward regardless of the conditions that we're in. This last thing I'll tell you is that our model from the very beginning, and I think the model I developed about in around 2009 to do this, was really after a lot of my work with some organizations that were truly broken. And I worked for some fairly large organizations, a museum in North Carolina, and they had really huge issues. And part of it really went back to this idea of being, you have to have these positions. You have to have this function. You have to have, just because that's what the models were, doesn't mean you need to do that. So we refocused and said, how do we work with contractual workers more? How do we work with the actual artists and scientists in our community more? How do we actually pay people who are from our communities that have low income to do the work that we need to do? How is all that done in a way rather than having our own maintenance and installation department? And, it makes much more sense, the model that we've had, and has helped us to really pivot in the end. Anything else from either one of you?
I mean, I see that a lot in my work as a journalist. I've always been taught, listening first. You always listen. If you just start coming to an interview with just a list of questions that you just want to get those questions in, and you're not listening and paying attention, you're going to miss probably the whole heart of the story. And the same thing goes for organizations. And if you look around during this COVID time and during this time, we have still been out covering organizations and doing interviews. The small groups, the neighborhood groups, the groups that often get overlooked, they're making it, they're doing it. Why? Because they're still listening to the people around them, and they're still trying to help them and reach out to them in just the basic ways. And that's something that you just keep lifting that up, and it just expands your program and your organization and what you're trying to do. It's hard to do because people don't like to listen, they like to talk. And you have to have conversations. And once again, that the daVinci Pursuit is all about conversations with different people and different things to bring everybody together, because everybody's really on the same page. We just sometimes forget that we are.
Great. Jheel, any last words?
Yeah, I was just going to bring it back to some, maybe something more sciencey. And I just, in terms of human beings, resiliency and adapting is something that you can learn. And I mean, a lot of like non-drug based therapies, when you do talk therapy and things like that, that's meant to build your resilience or how you react to situations. And so I think when we're thinking about organizations or nonprofits, or even just generally in terms of artists and their works, I think what's important to think about is, like you said, you have this time to think about who are you, but you'll also have time to think about what you want to be 5 or 10 or 15 years from now. And understanding that in order to get to that stage or to those goals and achieve them, that you are going to have to build resiliency, because you have no idea what's going to happen in the future. You have no idea if it's going to get better or worse, and hopefully it will be better. But if you start building resiliency now, or at least changing the way your attitude towards whatever changes or bad traumatic events that happen, as long as you're able to readjust, like we've been talking about, you will be able to hit those goals, multiple years from now. But that is extremely important. You have to have that mindset to be able to even keep going and actually refocus to what you want to actually achieve.
Yeah, and I would think, Jheel, along with that is holding on to your enthusiasm and your passion, which is really hard when you're stressed.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when you can look out there and you can say there is a future for us, I know kind of where I'm going with this. The other parts of my life might not be under control in terms of what's happening, but this part I can. And I think that's been what's been rewarding for us as a board and the community we work with, is we're still moving. We haven't shut down. And I think that's the hardest thing, when an organization cannot figure out how to move itself forward, closes itself down for an interim and waits.
Mm-hmm.
That is a really bad place to be. And it's really bad for the public, and it's really bad for the institution. So I guess what we're saying to all of you is be resilient, move yourself forward, but refocus yourself on what really is the most important and essential things that you do, and then do them better than you've ever done them before, and get excited about it.
Yeah. Baby steps are better than giant leaps, because baby steps, you feel everything. You see everything as you move along. Giant leaps, you miss a lot along the way. And I think sometimes humans want to just do the giant leaps instead of the baby steps. And even something small means so much to so many different people that don't ever think it doesn't.
Right. So we want to thank you all. We're going to take some questions now. I'm going to kick it back to our moderator to handle that. And I thank both of my colleagues so much for doing this. And we're so glad all of you are here.
Yes, thank you all.
Yeah, this has been wonderful so far. I definitely appreciate all of the, collective wisdom coming from the three of you. So if you didn't get to see, for our participants, I had just thrown a little notation in the chat box that we would love to know kind of who's here in terms of, what organizations you represent, but also if you have any specific questions for our wonderful presenters. So I'm actually going to, encourage you, if you'd like to come off mute, you may, or feel free to just throw it in the chat and then we'll address it. See, I haven't had any yet personally. So I would say, curious, what would you guys each recommend, just kind of as a bare bones, how do they go from here, looking ahead? Yeah, kind of summation of your recommendations, if you don't mind.
Sure. I think the very first step is to go back to your board, and go back and say to your board, we want to move forward with some things we've always wanted to do, and put them in a creative brainstorming mode, which they might not have been in for a long time. And it isn't that we want them to invent program, because that's board overreach, and we don't want to restart that. And we don't want them doing the program. What we want them to do is engage in what is it that we are about? What is it that's essential? And once you get that, then you can have the really kind of neat discussions with your board, which are about, how do we do this? What are the resources we need? How do we financially do it? Who are the foundations that we could be aligned with? This is an opportunity. Who do we need as an audience? And when you do that, that is your first step.
Yeah, I agree. It's a great opportunity for collaboration. Once again, not just only with your board, but reaching out to other organizations as well, to helping each other out. Like I said, how we've done that with Indie Convergence, and we do that regularly with many other organizations during the year. And so you go back and you say, okay, what were we doing? What were we going to do? and what can we still do? Because we still can do things.
Yeah, and if I can just add to that, slightly different perspective for me is I've seen a lot of not just organizations, but also people use social media to their advantage. And I know some people or go either way about it, but I really think that you have this tool, and if you use it correctly, that's part of why we've been able to reach so many people. Is a lot of our content is online, and so we're able to reach across countries and different populations. And so really think about, if you have ideas, how could you possibly turn it into something you can package into like a social media, or even like put it on a website, but something that you can put out there so that you're actually, I mean, if it's in your interest to, reach more people, then I think that would be really valuable.
Wonderful. Yeah, I love the notion of collaboration and using your board, and then of course using folks from everywhere in terms of social media. We did end up getting a couple of questions. I'm going to address one of them aloud, and then you feel free to whoever wants to take it. So from Susan Mendenhall, she says, "Do you have thoughts about helping to keep staff and colleagues engaged during times of stress?"
Oh yeah. And Jheel, you can jump in, Jheel, as well, but the way you keep people engaged is by being clear as to where we're going. Everything about COVID is we don't know anything, right? And so that kind of took everybody by surprise. And a lot of organizations don't know where they're going, and they don't communicate it to their staff. And they're worried themselves. So when they get in front of their staff, I'm going to have to lay some of you off. Those are all the realities. However, if you can come together with your staff and say, this is what we'd like to do. We've talked to the board, this is where we want to go. How can you help make this a reality? That changes things, and help to put staff members in a more equal role than maybe they have been, where they're also helping you to figure out, how do we get the funds? How do we do that? The second part, and there was somebody asked that question also on funding. I have found this as an opportunity to go and say, a lot of people are laid off from other nonprofits. How can I, through daVinci Pursuit, employ them at least part-time? And so that's an interesting collaboration idea. How could your organization actually, if you've had to lay off a full-time member, how could we actually use somebody in a part-time or contractual way that employs somebody else? And if we're all doing that to each other as an arts community, our biggest problem in the arts is that we're all, as institutions, individuals, we're all competing. It's a huge problem. This is the opportunity to quit competing.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there too. It's that flexibility thing, that giving everybody an equal voice and the ability to say, here is what I can do. I can't do this, this, and this, but I could do this. And if little small parts can all come together. And if you already had your list of what you were hoping to do this year, don't give that up. Just find different ways to do it. Don't try to do them all. I mean, we came to that realization pretty quickly. It's like, okay, we have these projects we want to get done. Realistically, that's not going to happen. Realistically, what can? Which ones could happen? And how do we make those happen? We had a very honest conversations about that. And it opens everybody up, and it makes everybody feel better too. It's like you can feel that, oh, okay, good. Kind of that de-stressing thing that is what we're all looking for.
I'll throw another question out there that I saw. Any tips for embarking on strategic planning in this kind of time? That's from Lori from the New Harmony Project. She said, knowing we'll be examining all of these questions, but with the COVID lens of being in the place of already thinking outside the box, how do we not go too far from the core? So the mission. Thank you.
Rock, paper, scissors, maybe? Dice?
It's back on what this whole session was about.
Yeah.
And you should be doing your strategic planning. There shouldn't have been any of that stopped. In fact, a strategic plan for me is useless after about 6 months. So one of the things I feel is that and I do, and the board members know this, both of you are, I engage with them in strategic planning ongoing all the time.
Yep.
Right? We don't try to write something that we think is going to last for 5 years. That's back in that model of resistance, not resiliency. This idea that you can plan for the future for way out there is crazy. There are some parts that you do have to plan, but the big point is if you're rolling and you continue and you say, wow, what did we do that was so creative in this moment of COVID that I can now take forward and position? We need to keep doing that. And we can add back some of the other stuff now that we can get close together. But like with Jheel, we can keep doing that, women in STEM, through video, the way we're doing it, and add on later roundtables of women talking and the others. And so that's how our mission changes.
And I can also report that over this course of time, as a reporter, you know, I've never stopped. So I've been reporting arts and culture since March. You know, first it had to be all interviews on the phone, then slowly places started to open up. Now I see more places opening up. People are being very safe. They're being very thoughtful. They're making their venues very user-friendly. And more people are responding by coming out physically. If you have an organization where you really do need people to physically come, you're not going to get 100 people, but you might get 10. And those 10 people might come and buy all the art that you have or hire all those musicians that you want. Be happy with those smaller things. So take what your big plan is, but just kind of downsize it a little bit. And know that people are still wanting to support the arts out there, and they are getting more comfortable with being out in the world again, but they're being very protective, you know, masking, distancing, that's very important to people. I really have found that. And you can turn off people really quick if you just open everything up and have no plan that way at all. And I think when it comes to offering things, you know, online on a regular basis, use your Facebook page, use your website, use your Instagram. People are having a lot more time, so they're following those things. Just keep them in mind, keep what you're doing in their minds. So this isn't happening now, but we're still here, just so they know that you're still here. And maybe that's how, you know, something that you were planning a big in-person thing next year. Instead, it's just going to be like a series of Instagram things or Facebook messages or emails with links to things to your members. Just letting them know about what's going on with your organization, and when the time comes that you will open up and bring everybody back together that way.
So appreciate your all's insight. I can say from you know, the Indiana Arts Commission view of things, we have been incredibly impressed with all of the organizations that we, you know, have moved forward with contracting and granting with, how they've been able to, you know, still stay in the spirit of their original grant and just move forward and, you know, meet their missions, but just doing it in a new way. So definitely appreciate that kind of view on, you know, still keeping what's important to you and your viewers, or but getting it all in as you can. So let's see, we've got a few more minutes, but I haven't seen any other new questions. So unless our wonderful presenters have any other closing thoughts, I think we're ready to close out. So grateful to Mark and Jheel and Jill, and to all of our folks that have attended. I know that we do have one more session available time frame this afternoon. And then of course we hope to see everybody back tomorrow for day 2 of the homecoming as well.
Yeah, I say don't give up. I mean, everybody's doing a great job, and like I said, the whole vibe of the arts community has gone from shock and fear to hope and progress. I can definitely say that as a reporter, as a board member, as a contributor. We still need beauty, music, and art, and all of you organizations out there are doing the best that you can, and that's enough, and that's what we want. And thank you for that.
And there is no better way to promote the arts,
right,
than by continuing doing good things.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we all talk about how we have to be, you know, but if we're all mopey and down and terrible, that rubs off on the public, and that is not the message we want to send. Even though that times are tough and they're hard, that's when your organization has to remain. That's what we've been. We've been that uplifting, what I said, that social emotional support. We have to continue to provide that, and we have to figure out ways to do it.